right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Saturday edition of the Paranormal Portal. I'm your host, Brent Thomas, and I'm absolutely thrilled that you're here with us tonight. We got a great show lined up for you, and I hope you guys will enjoy it. I know I'm absolutely thrilled and excited to get into this information tonight. And our guest tonight is personally one of my personal favorites. But before I go any further, let me, of course, welcome my good friend and co-host, Mr. Don Longbeard. How you doing, Don?
That would be I. You got me unmuted tonight. That's awesome.
I was way ahead of the bar tonight, Don.
Wow. So here we are, Saturday night.
This ain't my first rodeo.
No, that's true.
But although I often act like it is, but this time I actually remembered to unmute you. So I'm way ahead of the game. I'm way ahead of the schedule, but here we are. It's Saturday night, Don. Are you ready?
I'm ready, Brent. Let's get this puppy rolling.
Well, chugga, chugga, chugga. You're going to light that candle so we can actually see you. You're not
Don
Shadowbeard.
Don Shadowbeard.
All right. Well, before I go any further, let me welcome our special guest tonight, ladies and gentlemen. And he's a gentleman that doesn't need any introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. Joining us tonight, of course, is the founder of EnigmaTV, Enigma Radio on TFR as well, a fellow co-host. But he is probably the most prolific documentarian of our time, has done amazing research and has tirelessly pursued ancient truths and present truths, and has just been key in so many movements in raising consciousness, raising awareness. And it's my great pleasure to introduce to you all Mr. Christopher Everard. Welcome to the show, sir.
Hello, Brent.
Welcome to the show.
Now, I am getting a little tiny bit of echo. I don't know whether it's coming through my microphone or your microphone.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Oh, it's gone now. Okay. It's gone now.
Oh, good.
Well, it shows it's live, doesn't it?
Yes, it is live. We are live and unrehearsed.
Yeah, no, it's very nice to be with you. You know, it's 4 a.m. in the morning. I'm in Paris.
And I'm absolutely thrilled that you are willing to forego your beauty sleep and spend it with us.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, to be absolutely honest, the entire country is in lockdown.
Oh.
There's been 80,000 police on the streets deployed by Emmanuel Macron to protect him.
Wow.
And he's escaped now. He's left the country. He's gone off to some conference in Marrakesh in Morocco.
Oh, geez.
And the entire nation of France is bonded around several kind of new demands that they're making on the government: slash taxes, slash the cost of fuel. They want Facebook and Amazon and Google and PayPal and all these mega corporations that have dodged tax, paying their tax, to pay all of that backdated tax, some for the last 10 years, into a social fund, which is going to be, I don't know, somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000 million of unpaid taxes.
Wow.
And they want control of that fund themselves. They don't want the government to control it.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, we've had troops on the streets. There's tanks rolling down the street in Paris with the European Union flag on the side. And people who are old enough, they'll know that 1968, 50 years ago, there were massive. There was a kind of revolution in 1968, and 50 years later, the French have had another revolution. But now this French revolution is spread across the borders, and there's a Dutch version of this revolution. Boy, they're really well organized. I can tell you that in Holland.
Wow.
And they're demanding lower taxes, better standard of living. The protests are in Belgium. The Prime Minister's office of Brussels has been surrounded. So I've been up early like this. I mean, film people do tend to get up very early because, you want to get the light and you want to drive out to a location.
Sure.
So I am up, usually very early, but not usually on the radio at this time.
I hope you had your coffee.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I've posted up a few things for us to discuss on Facebook.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Let me get over that.
Yeah. So, I mean, as far as I'm aware, we want to do ancient technology. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah, I mean, it's something that's definitely exciting to me, and I know a lot of our listeners are really thrilled about the idea of rediscovering these ancient truths that our
Yeah.
ancestors knew, but somehow we all forgot.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the technology that they had in the ancient world is not really, you can't categorize it in the same as the technology which we have today.
Uh huh.
Their view of uh, electrical energy, for example,
Hmm.
and the flow of energy was really all part of a holistic, magical, telepathic, spiritual ideal.
Okay.
And it was all in the hands of the priesthood. Okay.
Oh, okay.
The kind of knowledge of flows of electrical energy
Hmm.
and the knowledge of the inherent piezo effect from crystals,
Hmm.
the knowledge of the Ark of the Covenant, which was an Egyptian artifact. It's not Jewish. The Ark of the Covenant is Egyptian.
Oh.
All of this was kept as a secret kind of knowledge base
Hmm.
within the high priesthood cults.
Wow.
And it's those priesthood cults which were rather like civil servants or the administration workers of the governments of today.
Hmm.
You don't know who they are, but they are the people that stay in power regardless of which politician is on the throne, if you like.
Oh, okay.
And um, the discharges of electricity that I discovered when I was researching my book Stone Age Psychedelia
Hmm.
really gave birth to a whole network of secret societies based around this idea of the arc, a discharge arc
Hmm.
of electricity.
Wow.
Yeah, so arc means a discharge of electricity, but there's another arc, which is spelled with a K, which means uh, a kind of receptacle
Hmm.
that you keep things in.
Okay.
So what happened then is that this network of secret societies, based around the idea of this arc of electricity,
Hmm.
fanned out across the planet and evolved. And what we had the anode and the cathode,
Hmm.
the plus and the minus contacts with the arc in between.
Right.
That became the two pillars of King Solomon's temple,
Oh, wow.
Jachin and Boaz. And the
Wow.
arc of energy became the grand arch of Freemasonry.
Oh, man.
And so what they've done is they've hidden this technology under many different layers of symbolism.
Whoa.
Now, the Ark of the Covenant, very, very most probably contained inside Leyden jars.
Okay.
And Leyden jars are a kind of capacitor. They're very easy to make. You just need some metal foil. You put the contacts into a kind of stopper, which you can make out of cork.
Hmm.
Very, very simple to make. And they can actually collect static electricity from the atmosphere
Hmm.
and store it.
Wow.
And this was not the only form of electrical storage or electrical system which they have in which they had in ancient Egypt. There are hieroglyphs. I mean, there's one hieroglyph of a round ball like this
Hmm.
with a jagged line of energy inside the ball,
Wow.
and that's carved inside the crypt at Dendera.
Okay.
And this is probably the most important hieroglyph ever found, because you know what I should say to people is that the interpretation of hieroglyphs that you see in all the university textbooks
Hmm.
is really basically based on transliterations that were done in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, and there hasn't been any further work done on the transliteration of hieroglyphs in the academic world.
Wow. Okay.
So we had the time of Napoleon. Napoleon invaded Egypt, and he was following in the footsteps of Alexander the Great. A lot of people don't know this, but Alexander the Great not only invaded Egypt, he came from Macedonia, from northern Greece. He invaded Egypt, but he did more than that. He actually had himself crowned as a pharaoh, which I think is, considering he was Greek. And he stayed in Egypt for quite a long time, and then he moved off, and I think he ended up dying of being bitten by a fly or something crazy like that, in Iraq or somewhere, or India or somewhere like that. But Napoleon was following in Alexander the Great's footsteps.
Okay.
And, Napoleon was not happy just being the president of France.
Okay.
He wanted to be a world emperor. So he wanted a French empire. So not only did he, he didn't just stage an expedition to France. He actually invaded France, and talk about megalomaniac. He claimed this is now French territory.
Oh.
Now, he took with him a lot of illustrators, really amazing illustrators, and it's from those illustrations from the Napoleonic invasion of Egypt that we can really see the state of all of the ancient monuments as they were. For example, Dendera, the Temple of Dendera, it's got very, very tall columns.
Right.
And these columns are inspired by two plants. The first one is the calamus plant, which is a reed, a water reed, that was the basis of how they developed their writing and communication systems, because those reeds are dried and bashed, and they're bashed into a kind of matrix, and that's basically how papyrus is made.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. So the calamus plant, very, very important plant. And so these giant columns, which are, they vary in size. There's a very, very tall one at Luxor, which I estimate to be at least 50 feet tall.
Oh, wow.
But I think most of them are around 30 feet tall. They're certainly taller than the average two-storied house. That'll give you some idea.
Sure.
And there's literally thousands of these columns all over Egypt, all carved in the style of these calamus water reeds.
Wow.
Now, calamus was not only important for papyrus, but it also contains DMT. In actual fact, it's one of the richest sources of DMT.
Oh, wow.
Now, anybody that's actually watched a shaman making ayahuasca, they'll know that when they get the Banisteriopsis caapi and the plants, usually the ayahuasqueros have a hammer, and they bash the vines up. Well, this is the exact same process of making papyrus.
Oh, very cool. Okay.
Yeah, you release the DMT into the juices that are released as you're hammering and smashing the fibers.
Wow.
So that'll give you some idea of how important the plant was, that they then go and carve thousands of these giant 30-foot tall columns that are fashioned and styled after this DMT-rich calamus reed plant. The second plant, which has inspired probably, I would say, tens of thousands of ancient Egyptian artifacts to be decorated, is the blue lily of the Nile.
Oh, okay.
Now, yeah, in India, that's known as the lotus.
Okay.
Buddha sits on the lotus.
Right.
The blue-skinned child, prodigy kind of god, Krishna, he also sits on a lotus.
Okay.
In actual fact, when you travel through India, you go into all kinds of different kind of temples. You'll see that many of these Indian deities are all sitting on top of lotus flowers.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, the original creation myths of Egypt, which are carved into the walls of the ruined pyramid of Unas, which is now called the Temple of Unas,
Okay.
they say that a blue lily flower came. There's two or three different versions of these creation texts, but the most popular one says that a flower broke out of an egg, and the flower grew and the petals opened, and inside those petals there was the god Re.
Ray. Okay.
Now, this plant was tested for all of its alkaloids by Professor Andrew Sherratt at Oxford University, and he invited me to, be part of his research team. And he had a very old book that had been published in the 1930s called Narcotic. I think it was called something like Narcotic Plants of the Ancient World.
Oh, okay.
And there was a kind of footnote about the blue lily of the Nile. And at that point, there hadn't been any scientific, nobody had isolated the alkaloids in the blue lotus flower.
Okay.
Now, to give you some idea of how important this flower was to the pharaohs, when Howard Carter opened the casket of Tutankhamun, they had a casket inside a casket inside a casket. Once they got down to the inner casket that's got the famous gold death mask,
Sure.
when he lifted the mask off, Tutankhamun had necklaces made of dried buds of the blue lily of the Nile, blue lotus of the Nile.
Sure.
He had 3,000 of them around his neck.
Wow.
Wow.
And if you look at the death mask at the bottom of the breastplate, you can literally see thousands and thousands and thousands of these mini little flower buds. That's the blue lotus of the Nile.
That is incredible.
Yeah. Now, Professor Andrew Sherratt, he discovered that it had a narcotic property.
Okay.
And he isolated some of these alkaloids. They're very, very similar to MDMA,
Really?
which is like the central base ingredient of party drugs like ecstasy.
Right.
Well, no, probably nowadays not so much, because MDMA, I don't think is actually in commercial kind of what they call in England disco biscuits. But I think MDMA has become, I don't know why. I think it's very difficult to isolate it. So I think a lot of the street drugs don't actually contain MDMA, even when they say, oh, yeah, mate, here's your ecstasy pill for the disco. It's got MDMA in it. But I don't think it has. I don't think it has MDMA in it. But anyway, the blue lotus of the Nile, through the research of Andrew Sherratt, I kind of continued his research.
Okay.
And what we discovered is that what they used to do is they used to bash the rhizome root. It's a water plant. It's an aquatic lotus flower.
Right.
So the bud floats on the surface of the water.
Right.
Okay.
And the rhizome stays underwater. What the ancient Egyptians used to do is they used to smash that bud to pieces and then stuff it all in these terracotta amphora jars. Pour in wine, bung the stopper on, and let that steep.
Oh, okay.
And then they created a party wine. And there are murals of these gorgeous, naked, nubile slave girls, all dancing, and they're all holding these buds to their noses.
Ah, very
So they
interesting.
had a very advanced, you know, they had a very advanced fermentation industry
Hmm.
in Egypt because most people were drinking beer.
Sure. Right.
And the beers that they were drinking also included the Blue Lotus, it included honey.
Oh.
Um, so that was an industry in its own right.
Hmm.
Then there was the calamus industry, which is harvesting the reeds, uh, extracting DMT, I think for sure.
Yeah.
You can just look at the faces of the gold death masks, and you can see that the eyes, if you look straight on to the golden death mask of King Tut,
Uh-huh.
his eyes are in that typical Buddhist semi trance.
Sure.
You know, his eyes are slightly turned up into the eyelids.
Ah. Okay.
Oh, yeah. If you look at that death mask, he is definitely tripping.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
amazing. So it was really a
And
big
he's
part of their
got
culture.
3,000 hallucinogenic plants etched into the gold breastplate.
Oh, well, that always helps.
So that gives you some idea of what was going on.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was like a party town then. It was pretty much it, right?
Yeah, these drugs are not really, they weren't really used to, yeah, I mean, obviously there are these murals of them all partying,
Right.
but these drugs were condensed down
Hmm.
and they were stored into these tiny little pots about this big.
Right.
Okay.
Can you actually see me, by the way?
Yeah, we can on YouTube.
Yep.
Yep.
And these little pots, you can see the pots being held up like this
Okay.
and being offered to the gods as offerings.
Mm.
Ah.
Because these are, if you like, the ancient version of Chanel number 5 or,
Oh.
you know,
Okay.
Givenchy,
Hmm.
you know, number 9. You know, these are very highfalutin, convoluted kind of perfume,
Now they
you know,
were
made by artisans, you know,
sure.
very valuable
Would
commodities
so even
being
the
offered to the gods.
would the perfumes as well have been infused with these psychological or psychedelic compounds so that they would be dermally absorbed, or is that a
Yeah,
possibility? Okay.
yeah, that's exactly what they were up to. That's
Wow.
exactly what they were doing. You know, basically in my book Stone Age Psychedelia, I've traced back the actual place where they had a kind of factory set up, a place called Fayoum, which
Mm.
is this amazing oasis,
Okay.
and they were churning out, you know, kind of industrial quantities
Wow.
of hallucinogenic oils and hallucinogenic perfumes
That's
and
amazing.
hallucinogenic wines.
That is
And this was all in a place called Fayoum,
Fayoum.
which you're not, you know, I studied Egyptology at Cambridge at a summer school back in 2013, and they didn't like me bringing this up at all. It's the kind of subject that if you do a university degree, they don't, you know, in Egyptology,
Sure.
they'll just, you know, and you say this to the teacher
Hmm.
that there was a hallucinogenic industry at Fayoum, they'll just like look at you like that, and you'll probably have a black mark on your name.
Now that's
Yeah.
interesting, and what you said about the hieroglyphs, I find interesting as well because I remember hearing and I only heard a bit of the conversation about it from somewhere, but I heard that there was a graduate student who had retranslated a lot of the hieroglyphs and was telling a whole different story than is what is generally accepted, but
Yeah.
academia kind of just dismissed her
Mm-hmm.
because
Yep.
it was so contrary to the their the rigid rules that they had adhered to all that time. So this
Yeah.
independent thinker came up and they basically just dismissed all that she had discovered.
That's right.
Hmm.
That's right. They even dismiss actual Egyptian people who have
Oh,
studied Egyptology in universities in Egypt.
wow.
One of one of my Egyptologists on my team, he has a degree
Hmm.
in Egyptology from Sohag University, which is up the Nile from Dendera and Abydos. I mean, it's literally, you know, this university is amongst
Uh-huh.
some of the most ancient temples. He studied Egyptology, got his degree there,
Hmm.
and, you know, his interpretations of the hieroglyphs completely ignored and poo-pooed by academia in Europe and America.
Wow. Well, we got about
Yeah.
30 seconds left, so we will definitely be returning for more of this amazing discovery. We're already off and off to the
just right off the top of the barrel. Boom.
boom. We're just, we definitely have hit the ground running, and it's already an amazing episode. So I can't wait to hear what we're going to get into next, ladies and gentlemen. But we will be back in just a couple of minutes. But again, if you're watching or if you're hearing the sound of our voice, you're listening on TFR, iHeart, TuneIn, or TalkStream Live, and you'd like to see what's going on, you can head over to youtube.com/paranormal portal. You can see Don and I and Chris. We're all on camera, and there will be some visual examples coming up. So we're definitely going to want to make that available to you guys as well. But don't go away. We'll be right back for more of the Paranormal Portal.
TFR.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Brent Thomas, your host, and this is the Paranormal Portal, joined by my good friend, Mr. Don Longbeard.
That's me.
And we are tonight joined by our great friend and fellow TFR host and head of Enigma TV, Enigma Radio, and creator of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of documentaries on the ancient world and ancient history and redefining the term ancient, really, in so many ways. But Mr. Christopher Everard, rather, is joining us. Sorry, Chris, I kind of had to breathe in the middle of saying your name. But welcome back to the show. And before the break, we were talking about the advancements in the medicinals by the ancients, and I think that that's incredibly important, and it's so overlooked. I mean, it's not even addressed in mainstream, histories and archaeologies and stuff, but it was really a big part of the culture.
It was the major part of the culture because the pharaohs, the kings and the queens and the princes and the princesses were very obviously constantly high. And so were the priesthoods that served them. You know, these priests were the high priests, and they were actually rubbing these salves and oils on their bodies, and the skin is the largest organ in the body, and it was absorbing all of the DMT and other hallucinogenic alkaloids from the blue lily of the Nile, from other hallucinogens. Remember, hashish, the pharaohs controlled Lebanon, and they controlled big, vast areas of land in Arabia where hashish, I mean, the history of hashish goes back so many thousands of years. It's actually been lost in the mists of time, literally.
Right.
So they had hashish. And of course, in my book, Stone Age Psychedelia, I've dedicated an entire chapter to the cocaine,
right?
The alkaloids and the traces of cocaine found in the tissues of mummies. And the first scientist to discover that, her name is Svetlana Babalanova. And what happened is that the mummy of King Ramesses II, greatest king, the richest man in the ancient world, his mummy was sent to Paris to be renovated. And the Museum of Mankind in Paris did these tests, and they discovered not only traces of cocaine, but they found traces of tobacco as well.
Wow.
Now, Svetlana Babalanova was ostracized by the academic community when she published her paper saying, hey, King Ramesses was, he did a few lines, And they said, listen, there's no way, because the coca plant is a plant from Central and South America.
Right.
And of course, academia has these strict historical boundary lines.
Right.
Now, I should say why those boundary lines exist.
Please.
They exist because of the colonization and the genocide that has been perpetrated by the royal families of Europe. What they used to do to colonize, say, for example, the United States, they used genocide. They used chemical warfare by distributing blankets infected with smallpox. Right. But what they would also do is they would smash up and burn all of the ancient artifacts from the Cree, the Apaches, the Blackfoot, the Arapaho, the Hopi, you name it. If it was an ancient historical artifact, it was burned or smashed to pieces.
Wow.
And that's because when you colonize a foreign land, you don't want the original First Nations people coming up to you and saying, hey, this is the historical proof that we had a community here. Right. This is our governmental structure. You know, these are our sort of ancient equivalent of crown jewels.
Right.
Right. So all of that is destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
So the USA has an enormous ancient history, which I investigate on this new TV series, which I'm doing on the Enigma channel called Heritage.
Mm-hmm.
I'm literally uncovering 15,000 years of the history of the United States of America.
Oh, wow.
But the reason that this is censored from the media, and it's censored from academia mostly as well. I mean, I can tell you now, I've seen the most ridiculous things in museums in the USA.
Oh, yeah.
You know, where very, very important anthropologically and spiritually important artifacts have literally been left unlabeled in these glass cases in various museums around the USA.
Wow.
I've got reams of footage and photographs, thousands of photos of mislabeled, misdated, unlabeled artifacts. This is all deliberate.
Really?
Because these universities, they're industries. The university network is a business, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they basically are always licking the boots of the European academic industry, and the European academic industry licks the boots of the aristocracy, and the aristocracy licks the boots of the royalty.
Right.
And so we have this kind of shockwave effect going through history of genocide, the erasing of ancient artifacts in colonized nations. So if we look at, say, for example, the Commonwealth, the British Commonwealth, which is the British Empire, you can see that they have systematically ransacked, pillaged, burned and destroyed thousands of years of artifacts in the USA, in Canada. They were pretty successful at doing it in parts of India as well. They've done it in Australia, and they've done it in New Zealand. Not only that, but they've also done it on Caribbean islands.
Wow.
Some members of the royal family in London actually own entire Caribbean islands. When you look for them on Google Maps, they're not there.
Oh.
When you get in a boat, the island is there. There's so much that this colonial kind of generation did to destroy the ancient world. It's really a massive crime against mankind. Of course, the Commonwealth also includes Tanzania, Rwanda, Uganda.
Right.
The Belgians control the Congo, which is where all the diamonds come from, and the Congo is one of the major foundation countries of voodoo. All I can say is that colonization has created fake histories. Fake news is not a new phenomenon.
Right. Good
Yeah,
point.
they've been creating fake news for centuries. And what they did in the academic world and in the university network is they deliberately drew these very hard borders across the ancient planet and said, oh, there's no way that the Egyptians went to Australia. No way. And the Egyptians never, ever went to the USA, because this is all part and parcel of stripping the dignity away from indigenous people who are now under the cosh of Buckingham Palace.
Right. Just a complete demoralization. Yeah.
Right. Well, that goes...
It's also to do with the spiritual ransacking of their spiritual telepathic kind of communication systems with the gods. No. The royal elite don't want any of that going on. They sent a Royal Navy ship to Easter Island, Rapa Nui, and they deliberately, they were like cat burglars. A cat burglar doesn't go into a property and just steal anything, just grab everything and stick it in the sack and go.
Right.
A cat burglar is a very intelligent person who very carefully studies exactly what the most valuable item is, what its significance is, and plans the burglary with meticulous precision, and takes just what is required. That's exactly what Queen Victoria did with Easter Island. She dispatched a brand spanking new ship. It was only 8 years old, HMS Topaz, and they took the Moai statue, which was the main central Moai that all the other Moai statues were spiritually connected with. And this was not standing out on the island like the other Moai. This was a smaller than normal Moai with very advanced, very elaborate, I should say, carvings on the front and the back. And basically, this was installed into a special ceremonial temple housing.
Wow.
So it wasn't standing outside. And that's the one that the Royal Navy went and snatched, which you now see standing in London at the British Museum.
Oh.
Right. Well,
Since 2013, the governor of Easter Island, Rapanui, has been formally requesting that statue to be returned. Since 2013, 5 years has already gone by, and the only kind of conversation that's happened so far is the British Museum say, well, we could make a replica, I suppose. Well, meaning that they'll send a replica back to Easter Island. This is spiritual vandalism.
Right.
Yep.
They've done it all over Britain. Britain is a magical landscape full of magic circles, which are the stone circles. They've driven roads through those magic circles. You can see roundabouts, with thousands of cars going around them. And in the middle of the roundabout, there's one obelisk megalithic stone, which dates back to at least 2450 BC, stuck in the middle of a roundabout. All the rest of the stones that used to make up that stone circle, all destroyed. They even smashed up this giant obelisk that stood in the center of a figure of 8 megalithic stone circle at Avebury in Wiltshire. They smashed this obelisk up. It was taller, get this, it was taller than all of the buildings in Britain.
Wow.
So it was the tallest man-made structure in Britain. It used to stand in the center of Avebury, all smashed to pieces, and they built a little garden wall out of it that goes around the local church. Where did they build the church? They built the church right in the middle of the stone circle.
What a crime.
Then, of course, they teach children, oh, don't believe in magic. Oh, no. Magic circles, that doesn't exist. Oh, no. Turn your page away. That's the game.
It is. You're right. And I think that's absolutely correct. I think it's the appropriation of customs, and of course the church is the Catholic Church that has been a long history of absolute.
The Catholic Church.
Here we go.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what a hodgepodge. What a hodgepodge load of nonsense.
Well,
I have to say, Brent, I don't know. We got a bit of time. The Catholicism, Christianity, and Islam are all invented by the same people. They're all invented. They're all permutations of Judaism.
Right. Okay. I've seen that you had mentioned that before. Yeah. That's a really unique viewpoint. I've never ever heard that reference before, but very cool.
Well,
it's very possible.
It's historically absolute fact.
Okay.
The Kaaba, that black cube, the Muslim people go on a Hajj, and they go, they've got to touch the Kaaba. They're going to touch it. And they all go round, you know, and thousands of people, literally tens of thousands of people every year go on this Hajj pilgrimage.
Okay.
Why have they got to touch the Kaaba? Why have they got to touch this cubed building that is draped in this mysterious black velvet? Why?
Isn't that
Because
the cave where
that is the housing of a meteorite. That, in actual fact, 2 meteorites that fell to Earth long before Islam was ever invented.
Sure.
And that is called the Black Stone.
Oh.
And this is the most sacred object in Islam. The Islamic name of the meteorite is Aswad. Aswad.
Oh.
Is that mentioned in the Quran? No.
Oh, okay.
It's not.
Huh.
The most holy place in Islam is not in the Quran. Who built the Kaaba? Not Muslim people.
Oh.
That cube-shaped building existed long before Islam ever came along.
Oh.
It was
okay.
actually meant to have been built by Abraham. Well, Abraham is this kind of composite historical character, the same as King Solomon.
Right.
But it was built by the Canaanite Judaic cults.
Oh.
And it was a receptacle building for all kinds of weird and wonderful artifacts, which today, the average person, if you showed them those artifacts, would say, whoa, mate, that's voodoo.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It had literally, it was like a mini museum of weird ancient artifacts. Now, if you go inside the Kaaba, they've cleaned it up. There's none of that weird voodoo stuff. There's just a few lamps hanging from the ceiling. That's it.
Huh.
In the corners, the exterior corners of the Kaaba building,
Mm-hmm.
you've got the meteorites. And that is the holiest thing in Islam. That's what they want to touch. Well, where did those meteorites come from?
Outer space.
They came from jewelers who were Jews in Medina and Mecca, who used to send the Bedouins out into the desert
Mm-hmm.
looking for meteorites, looking for any interesting stones that they could actually set into the jewelry which they were selling to whoever, the sultans, anybody who had the money.
Mm-hmm.
The Jews of Medina and Mecca would sell this jewelry.
Huh.
Now, where did that tradition come from? That tradition came from the pharaohs, because the pharaohs collected meteorites.
Wow.
And they kept them in these sacred boxes.
Wow.
And we know that the dagger, there's a sacrificial dagger found by Howard Carter in the tomb of Tutankhamun.
Yep.
The blade of that dagger is actually made from iron. Now, the official history books say, no, the pharaohs never had no iron. Okay?
Yeah.
They didn't have iron. That's impossible. But they did have iron.
Mm-hmm.
And the place where they got the iron from is by smelting meteorites.
Wow.
And the blade from Tutankhamun's dagger is actually a meteorite that's been heated up and flattened and sharpened.
Right. Yep.
Wow.
So, yeah, meteorites were very, very sacred objects in the ancient world, because they were literally, it's like the Truman Show, where he's getting into his car and the light falls down.
Right.
Well, if you roll back the Truman Show back to the time of the pharaohs, he would have dropped down to his knees and started worshipping that light.
Sure. No, that's
So,
interesting, because
yeah.
even now still there are several communities that want to buy up, and they pay huge amounts of money for these meteorites that people find, and it baffles my imagination. Why are they finding these meteorites so incredibly valuable that they're willing to pay thousands of dollars per ounce of these things? You know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think they're very fascinating things. I mean,
Oh, sure.
I studied astronomy. I like meteorites as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think also people buy them because they're hoping that they're going to find some kind of rare earth metal, or they're going to find some
Okay.
previously undiscovered mineral
Well,
or element.
I just kind of wondered if there was some kind of occult tie that they were using, since these objects came from space.
Yeah.
Were these occult groups buying them up under the cover of scientific research, and who knows?
Oh yeah, could
know?
be, could be. You know, meteorites. Yeah, they're very, very interesting objects, and I mean, like comets, for example, in the Himalayas. Oh my God, you go to a place called Ladakh.
Okay.
Ladakh is actually a country, but it's a country that's not usually marked on any maps,
Okay.
and it's a protectorate of India. Now, it's never been invaded by the communist Chinese, and Ladakh is basically the same as Tibet.
Okay.
The difference today is that Tibet has got, like, you know, modern cable cars, modern trains, and, you know, Chinese soda pop and wah. But Ladakh is still the traditional kind of way of life.
Okay.
And in Ladakh, if there's a comet, oh my God, you know, people are out en masse.
Really?
And 24 hours a day in Ladakh, they set up these community village kind of, I suppose you call them ceremonies, where they're banging pots and pans with wooden spoons 24 hours a day, looking up at the comet,
Wow.
trying to get rid of the comet.
Really?
Yeah, because the comet for them is really bad news.
Oh.
It's a bringer of bad omens.
It's a harbinger. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So-
incredibly interesting.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground in the last half an hour, haven't we? We've gone from
But that's fascinating. I mean, it's a fascinating
Yeah.
journey, and I never tire of hearing you explain and speak about these things. Now, when on the last show when you're on, you mentioned that the cocaine residue was found on Ramses as well, and to me that was absolutely earth-shattering, because it totally. For a long time, people were like, well, they built pyramids and they were separated by these great distances, and how could they have all done that if they were separated? But then you talked
they
about
were not
this.
separated.
Right. There was open trade routes between them, and it's no wonder they built
Yeah.
pyramids, because they were sharing knowledge.
Disco biscuits too.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, disco biscuits. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that the pharaohs actually traveled to go and buy the
Sure.
cocaine.
But there was trade.
The most likely scenario is that there were traders, and like we know that there was the so-called Marco Polo
Right.
Silk Road.
Right.
Sure.
Well, there was obviously some kind of transatlantic version of that.
Had to be.
That's amazing.
I think the thing with academia is that they look at everything as black and white.
Right.
Yeah.
There's this website called Don's Maps, and I've just had an email from the guy that runs that website, and his attitude is that Neanderthals, the entire Neanderthal civilization turned off like that, like a light. Well, certain years. This is what academia does to people.
Right.
Is that it poisons their brains, and they actually don't think about it. How can an entire civilization, the Neanderthals were spread over this vast area,
Right.
how can they just disappear like that? And then Cro-Magnon appear, and then Cro-Magnon disappear. Academia is literally like that.
Yeah, it's very, very strange. But I think that in academia lies their power, because they have a power because they are the authority and that they are knowledge. And if anything challenges that, then to them it challenges their authority, which is ridiculous. I mean, they should be about being, dedicated to learning and discovery, but they're not. They're about maintaining that stranglehold on knowledge.
Yeah, people want those degrees, which is basically to get a degree you either remember everything that they tell you and you just write it out verbatim, or you do what a lot of rich people do, is you pay for your thesis to be written by a professional.
Yep.
Sure. Right. Exactly.
And the only reason people want those degrees is so that it looks good on their resume, or they can get a job in a museum.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very true.
Yeah, you know, times have changed though. You know,
I think so.
The whole world has changed because of the internet.
Right. Knowledge is flowing freely without their ability to stifle it, and that's probably why people like Facebook and Twitter feel the need to try to choke it a different way. But we're going to head to our hour break, ladies and gentlemen, and we will be back for the second hour of our show. But as you can tell, it's an amazing journey already, and it only is going to get better. So don't go away. We will return in just about 3 minutes here. So get a drink, use the loo, and join us back here in just a couple minutes.
Play their games. Everybody loves to place their bets. They don't understand the price I paid. They don't care to comprehend. Trace their lines upon my body, dripping scars across my heart. Raging anger pours inside me as their lies keep falling apart.
Carol Ann is not like those she's with. They're attracted to the one thing about her that is different from themselves. Her life force. It is very strong. It gives off its own illumination. It is a light that implies life and memory of love and home and earthly pleasures. Something they desperately desire, but can't have anymore. Right now, she's the closest thing to that.
Poltergeist are usually associated with an individual. Hauntings seem to be connected with an area. A house, usually.
Poltergeist disturbances are of fairly short duration, perhaps a couple of months. Hauntings can go on for years.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to hour number 2 here on the Paranormal Portal. I'm your host, Brent Thomas, and we are having an epic journey. Don is here with me.
That's me.
That's him. And we, of course, are tonight joined by Mr. Christopher Everard, and we are absolutely having an amazing discussion. Welcome back, Chris.
Hello there. Hello.
I thought we lost you for a second. I was like, where'd he go? And I was looking through the ad people, and it's like, it's not there. I don't know where it is. Ah! So I'm like, what's plan B, Don? Don, juggle. I'll keep looking.
Well, back on the Paranormal Portal, we lost our tree.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, Don's prestidigitation. All right, but we are back, ladies and gentlemen, and of course, we're talking about ancient technologies and just ancient knowledge that has been lost to time.
Right.
And we've already had an epic journey now. One of the other things, Chris, that you've been absolutely spearheading discovery and bringing this knowledge to the mainstream is the idea of the ancients having way back when having cement. And what people have considered to be carvings are actually cement structures.
Yes, that's absolutely true. I've just come back from filming in museums. One big museum in Paris, we had special access, and they lifted the big glass coverings off of some of the statues. And I've been using 4K cameras with macro focusing rings so that we can focus on very tiny objects. And they have a giant sphinx inside one of the Parisian museums that is, I believe, made from some special concrete. It does contain granite, but the granite has been pulverized and then reconstituted with a binder. And there is actually a French institute called the Polymer Institute that have done a lot of research on ancient Egyptian artifacts, and they give lectures and they do workshops and stuff. And it's very interesting because when you visit the Polymer Institute, they've got these reproductions of famous Egyptian busts. One's in marble, one's in like black diorite, one's in granite, another one's in sandstone, another one's in lime. And they're all made by the Institute. Now, under a microscope, it just looks like ordinary limestone. Under a microscope, it looks like volcanic rock. That's because they have copied the techniques where they more or less atomized and pulverized the stone and then reconstituted it. Wow. And if you look at the hieroglyphs on the side of the obelisk that stands at Place de la Concorde in Paris, they're very obviously not carved. Wow. Those hieroglyphs they were carved in stone as kind of what shall we call them? It's like a stencil that you press into wet cement.
Wow,
That's how they were done.
that's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. And this is, again, this is an area academia has done no research whatsoever. On the Enigma channel, you can see footage that I filmed at the Luxor Temple. Very, very interesting temple. They just found in the last few years, I think they found 400 sphinxes.
Oh, really?
Just like that. And they found them when they started building a road. And they're in two long lines. And they found this massive processional avenue lined with sphinxes.
Wow.
There was just literally about 1.5 feet, 18 inches under the surface of the ground.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Now, I've looked at these very, very carefully, and I've looked at the composition of the actual stone. And the reason that it was easy to do that is because I won't name the person who did it, but he wears a hat and he appears on mainstream media as an Egyptologist. A lot of the heads of these sphinxes were actually broken off deliberately. This is at the time of the Arab Spring Revolution, where they want democracy. And that was all murdered by MI6, Mossad, and the CIA creating ISIS. And so the elite of Egypt in the the Supreme Department of Antiquities, I won't name the man, but I dare say you can guess who I'm talking about, got these boats to go down the Nile.
Yep, that's right.
They smashed up a lot of the artifacts, broke the heads off of some of these sphinxes, put them on boats, and ended up selling them for garden makeovers. And people in Hollywood and rich people in Europe now have these original sphinx heads in their gardens.
That's horrible.
But what it enabled me to do is actually look very carefully at the composition of the stone.
Okay.
And at Luxor Temple, there is a very, very famous, very, very large carving of King Tutankhamun, and he's got his arm around his wife.
Okay.
His wife was his sister.
Yep.
All right. That was a very common thing in the ancient world.
They were a close family.
And her nose is broken off. Now, instead of seeing the raw broken stone, no, it's not like that. It's actually hollow.
Yeah.
And you can stick the tip of your tripod right into that hole.
Wow.
And it goes right really deep. And the actual statue itself, I'm not saying that there isn't amazing craftsmanship.
Oh, sure.
Believe me, the craftsmanship is amazing. But the core of these giant statues, which stand, 18, 20, 25 feet tall, the core is made of big blocks of limestone.
Wow.
That is then covered in an ancient kind of cement. And that is when the real artistry starts.
Right.
When that cement is still wet, that's when they're carving all this amazing stuff, the features of the face. If you look at these giant carved feet, like the toenails, perfect. They've even got like the cuticle of the nails all carved into this stone.
That's amazing.
Well, that's very difficult to do. But if you think, that was like soft, like butter at one time when they carved it, obviously that makes life a lot easier for the carver.
No, I think it's
And
absolutely incredible.
the other thing I discovered, you can see all of this on the Enigma channel, by the way. EnigmaTV.com. You can see a whole load of documentaries in their series called Fallen Angels. And you can see that the famous carvings on the temple walls at Luxor are not carved actually into those walls at all.
Wow.
Those carvings are actually on panels which were carved at ground level, and then they were hoisted up, and they were stuck onto the walls. The walls themselves are made of big, coarse blocks of limestone.
Wow.
Again, none of this is really, you can't find any information about this. You can find some papers, some academic papers about it, not very many.
That's amazing.
And so people visit Egypt, you know, the standard guides, you know, they don't know much either. You know,
Sure.
they've gone through the university,
Yeah.
you know, sausage factory, just repeating the same old stuff.
That's awesome.
And you know, so really now, I tell you now, there's been a digital revolution. Okay, the digital revolution is not just the internet, but it's all the. I'm using Cinealta cameras. This is the same cameras that George Lucas makes Star Wars movies with.
Wow.
But now they've become so small that we can actually attach them to drones. We can put them on these tall jib tripod arms, which you can see on the Enigma channel. And we can actually put the camera within millimeters of, say, the carved face of Ramesses II.
Right.
And, you know, that type of, the type of filming that you see on the Enigma channel is not done on the mainstream documentaries.
Right.
Mainstream documentaries about Egyptology
They don't want you
and
to see
about the
anything.
ancient world are all made to a formula.
Right.
Oh, sure.
And it's called, the formula has a name.
Oh.
In Hollywood, they call it the big question. And that's where they write the script. Could this be that? And did they do this? And if they did do that, did they go there? And why did they do that? And why did they go here? And what was this? And why was that? I mean, I could churn out, if all I'm doing is just asking questions like that,
Sure.
you know,
With no
I could churn out 100 times more TV shows than what I already produce.
Right. And they don't really answer anything with their formula.
They deliberately don't answer those questions.
Yeah.
You know, or if they do, they'll answer it partially, and you'll have to sit through 55 minutes of, you know, some, you know, kind of fairy tale version of history,
Right.
all disjointed and all obviously inaccurate, because none of the mainstream documentaries will admit that the ancient world had these very well established trading routes that went right the way around planet Earth. So, you know, I don't make that type of thing. It's turned me into a bit of a black sheep. I mean, the great thing about running the Enigma channel is obviously people subscribe. You can see who subscribed, obviously. And, you know, there's a very large number of academic people who do subscribe to the Enigma channel, but they dare not mention that because I have become, you know, one of their nemesises.
Right. You're challenging the status quo.
Not all of them. I have to say that some of the curators at some of the museums where I've visited several times, and then I've, you know, set them up subscriptions and I've shown them they've watched the documentaries with the artifacts that I filmed with their help. I would say about 1%, maybe 2% of them are now coming around thinking, yeah, you know,
Oh, cool.
I never thought about it. Like, for example, this is just one example. The giant Olmec heads.
Oh, right.
I can't remember the exact number. I think we've got 17 giant heads in various museums. They're in the Yucatan Peninsula. They're in Mexico. I think there's one or two in Honduras. We've got one or two in Guatemala. Now, I'm at this museum. It's a bit off the beaten track, okay, but it's a beautiful museum, 21st century museum. And I'm looking at, they've got like about 5 of these giant Olmec heads on display. Now, I'd deliberately gone there not to just film the heads with new 4K cameras, but What I was interested in is I was interested in the actual neckline.
Oh, okay.
And I said to the curators, I said, because they have these little ropes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I always say, I've come a long way. Would it be okay if I go over the ropes? I want to film the back of the head.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of curators, they go, oh, you're not allowed over those ropes. But a couple of them were very friendly. And I've been on Mexican TV.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of them did recognize me from a Mexican TV show.
Oh, fantastic.
And they said, yeah, you have to be very careful. Don't touch it. But I'm going to stay here and I'm going to watch you.
Okay.
So I filmed the backs of the Olmec heads in this museum.
Uh-huh.
I'm packing up my gear. And the curator said to me, he said, why are you filming the back of the head? And I said, I'm filming the back of the head, but I'm also filming the neckline at the back. And I want to see whether the base of the head was carved nice and smooth. And he went, oh. He said, well, why do you want to know whether it's smooth?
Uh-huh.
I said, because if it's rough, that means that the head has been broken off.
Oh,
Where's the rest of the statue?
Right,
Ah,
right.
Good point.
And like, if the statue is in scale with the head, there should be statues the same size as the giant statues which we see in Egypt.
Right.
Where are they?
And what did you find?
And I must have seen a dozen documentaries about the Olmecs produced by the mainstream media. These fundamental things are not researched in those documentaries.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me wonder why.
Right. What are they hiding? What are they covering up? Now, do you mind stating what you found?
Yes, some of them were carved.
Okay.
And the bases were smooth, but two of them that I filmed, you can see all this on the Enigma channel, they'd been broken.
Oh, man.
Yeah, they've been broken. Now, you can say, oh, well, it was the bottom part of the neck that was broken. I don't think so. I think that they were carving on a scale of what we see in ancient Egypt.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And I think that those bodies were either smashed up and the stone was reused, or maybe those bodies are stuck in the ground somewhere.
Wow, yeah. Well, ISIS and all of them are just going through and tearing everything up when they go through there.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're erasing all of that history, and unfortunately, they say to the victor goes the spoils, but also so does the writing of the history. So, it's...
Sure, the Olmecs would have been South America, though, right?
Well, true. Well, okay, yes, true enough. That's correct. But then in that case, you've got the Contras.
Sure.
And you've got all of the dissidents down there as well, because you've got all the Catholics, the Spanish Catholics and things like that down there that don't humble opinion.
Sure.
I'm stating a humble opinion,
Mm-hmm.
that don't want, the same thing getting out, a similar situation as in what's in Egypt.
Sure. Yeah, it's not the sole property of ISIS to destroy history.
Right,
No,
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. No, I get what you're saying. Now, I can't help but ask, and maybe I don't think you've referenced this before, but we've never had you on camera before on the show. But
yeah.
Are those alien grays on that board behind you?
No, it's I've done loads of these. I did this painting. I've done about 7 or 8 of these paintings. This is a copy painting that I've done.
Oh,
Wow.
That I've copied from the ceiling of a cave in Kimberley in Western Australia.
wow.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and these entities, they're spiritual teachers, and they're called Wanjinas.
Wow.
And they are, if you like, the teachers, the guides, the ancestral spirits of the Aboriginal people.
Oh.
And I've done about, this was the first Wangina painting I did, and I've done about 7 or 8 of them. And they basically were first brought to people's attention publicly by the guy that invented Earl Grey tea.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah, Lord Grey. Yeah, he had money. He went on an expedition. And he personally, give this guy credit. He personally discovered a cave, very, very secret cave in the Kimberleys in Australia, Western Australia. And he found a full-length Wangina. Usually they're depicted just with their heads.
Okay.
But he found a full-length one with its body and everything. It's really a fascinating illustration. You see it in my book, Stone Age Psychedelia, full frame of that comes from the book that was published. I think it was 1826.
Wow.
He's one of the very, very first pioneers. The Wangina are so important to the Aboriginal world view and their spirit view. They are the great teachers. And yeah, they do look like aliens.
That's just
and
amazing.
There's many different types of them, and they're often depicted alongside crocodiles, which is a very similar thing that you see in ancient Egypt. You see there's even a crocodile god. There's even a temple dedicated to the crocodile god in ancient Egypt. So the word Wangina also has the Arabic word for demon in the middle of it, which is jinn, Wangina. And these are the archetypal ancient spirits that the Aboriginal people actually tap into.
That's amazing. And you know,
Yeah.
when you talk to people that are experiencers of UFOs or contactees, and when they meet these greys, a lot of people have positive experiences, and they say that, you know, that they're here to help, and then you see that correlation in that ancient art. To me, is just, that's a breathtaking correlation. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Me personally, I don't think the greys do mean, I think if they were benevolent, they wouldn't skulk around in secret.
Sure. Well, there is that. Yeah.
I'm very concerned, actually, about there's a lot of blogs out there saying, oh, aliens, they came down like angels and they healed us. Okay.
Yeah, there are. Yeah.
I personally, I take the view that, we've been sending probes into space for like 50 years. Okay. The Viking probes have gone out of our solar system. The Pioneer probes are way out of our solar system now. And basically, I think aliens are going to be using probes the same as us.
Sure.
And that, you can see a huge amount of original footage, of real footage in My Secret Space films. Now, of course, YouTube is deliberately flooded with fake videos so that this generation of millennials, they don't know what is real and what isn't in UFO and ufology. But you can see these small spheres. They're the most common type of UFO worldwide. You can see them being released into the atmosphere in Scotland by footage that was filmed by Brian McPhee, and footage from Mexico and Guatemala. London, you can see these small spheres, metallic type spheres. I believe that they're probes.
Sure.
The same as we send, where's the little rover just landed? Is it Venus or somewhere?
Oh, yeah.
We've just sent like Mars, or it's gone to some. This is what the aliens are going to be doing.
Sure. That makes sense. That does make sense.
Yeah. The next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be sending robots to the really hostile planets. Planets that have got atmospheres that are very acidic. No oxygen. You don't even stand a chance of breathing those atmospheres. Our next step is to send real robots, not these little rovers, but real robots who are going to be colonizing and setting up research bases. This is the next step in space exploration.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Now, how about the Greys are robots, but they're not made of mechanicals.
Sure.
They've been genetically grown.
That's a lot of people that believe that. That's really
Yeah.
interesting. Well, I've heard that correlating information from many people that say that they're contactees. There's a gentleman that appears on our show. His name is Jim Mount, and he says very similar things about even us being genetic modifications and manipulations. And I don't know, the whole idea of the Anunnaki and all of that is. It's pretty interesting and compelling stuff. But we're going to go to our last break, ladies and gentlemen. And you can see this is just a mind-numbing night. It's funny, Chris, when you're on, the most common word that I say is, oh, really? Oh. It's just amazing and how you bounce through information and have all these references and can tag it all. It's absolutely astounding. But we will get back to more with Christopher Everard when we come back for the last half hour of the show. Don't go away.
spooky music.
Oh, yeah. We roll hard here in this portal, Mr. Everard, I'm telling you. But welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Paranormal Portal. I'm your host, Brent Thomas. And, of course, I'm joined by my good friend, Don. And, of course, our special guest, Mr. Christopher Everard. Welcome back, sir. No more yawning.
Hello.
I know you're tired, but I got to tell you, you're an amazing guy. Because you rolled out of bed.
That's good.
You rolled out of bed. And I don't know how much coffee you have to work with to get to this point, but
I drink a whole lake of coffee every morning. They say it's bad for you.
well, that's what I've heard too, but it hasn't stopped. But you're already churning out all this amazing knowledge and stuff this early in the day. I'm telling you, me personally, I don't function for about 3 hours past waking up. It's just like this slow burn.
Well, I have to say, film people, if you work in TV, you do have to get up very, very early.
Oh, I bet.
And, I know, you see people on Facebook, they say, oh, you film people, you've got it easy, your job is so easy and everything. But film work and TV work is very, very hard work.
Oh,
very, very hard work. You have to get used to getting up at like 4 in the morning. And usually we're rolling cameras in the summer. For example, when we go to Egypt, the ancient monuments are open at 6 a.m.
Wow.
And that means that we get up around 4.
Right.
And, we have to get all the camera gear ready and have to get to the place first. There's usually a couple of hours of driving.
That's amazing.
And we're usually there at 6. And the reason that we get there very early is because we have, the ancient sites to ourselves. It's very, very difficult filming when you're surrounded by tourists, because what happens is that you only need one coach party of tourists to arrive at an ancient site. They see me, they see the cameras, the tripods, and, they see us working. And immediately you're donutted by quite a large number of people. And of course, they're all then taking selfies, and it kind of puts you off quite a bit. So I always try and do my filming at like 6 in the morning as soon as the site's open.
Oh, I can imagine. That's pretty powerful. But Don, you said we had a question from the chat from Ken.
Right.
Ken Rotman, of course, is a longtime listener from Australia. I'll let you go ahead, Don.
Well,
oh yeah, Ken. I think I've spoken to Ken before.
Oh, you definitely have spoken to Ken. Ken's been watching you since before you were on TFR, so he's been.
Oh, there you go.
He's been a stalker. He's a stalker. Hey, but he's asking.
I recognize his name straight away.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, he's asking about what's your ideas about the mud flood theories and what's coming out about those. The new information, should I say, not really new, but the forgotten information that's become around again. Are you versed in those, the mud flood theory?
No. Tell me about it.
Yeah, I wish I could. It's something that I've just been bumping into, and I haven't had a whole lot of chance to research it myself. So, unfortunately, Ken, we're going to have to disappoint you on this one.
None of us know about.
Yeah, we can't answer every single question all the time. Yeah. I'll look into it though, definitely. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Very cool. And so another thing.
Now, I tell you what, guys, I've posted up some interesting photos on my Facebook page.
Yep, and I dropped.
If people want to go to and find me, it's facebook.com/Christopher Everard, and there's 2 profiles of me, but the top photo, or the most recent photo that I've published, is an old black and white photo of the Obios of Salisbury, and a picture of the Horsehead Nebula.
Okay.
Wow. Okay.
Can you guys see that?
Is the one, it says very rare photo of electrical aura or telepathic aura?
Yeah,
field?
if you refresh my page,
okay,
facebook.com/Christopher Everard, and then you put 2 capital I's for Christopher Everard's second account.
Yep, that's what I'm on.
You should see the first post is a black and white photograph of this strange Obios, black and white photo from more than 100 years ago from Salisbury in Wiltshire.
Right.
And a picture of the Horsehead Nebula. Are they showing that to you?
Yeah, I'm putting it up on screen right now. Okay, so the black and white photo is up now. Okay.
Yeah. Now that is an extremely rare photo. I do believe that's the first time that photo has ever been seen by the public.
Wow.
This is a whole area of research which I've done for a documentary series on the Enigma channel. It's enigmachannel.com. And this is an obios, very, very strange creature that's actually made in various towns in Britain, especially in the south of England. They have an obios of Salisbury, which is this one.
Okay.
They have an obios in Padstow in Cornwall. And on May Day, Beltane, every year,
My
they
birthday.
parade this weird looking creature through the streets. Before that happens, there are various rituals with the Morris dancers out in the megalithic stone circles all over England. And in the research which I've done, you can see this on the Enigma channel, I found that this is a mystery play, and the obios represents the Horsehead Nebula. And he has a cloak. You can see the cloak in the picture.
Right.
And if you look at the close-ups of that picture, you can see that there's star constellations embroidered with stitching
the gentleman on the
into
left.
the obios's cloak.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Now, the origins of this go way back. This is something that's probably started in Africa and has then migrated and spread over Europe.
Wow.
And then the next picture is a very, very rare picture. I do believe, I think this is the first time this has been seen publicly. This is in Dorset in the south of England, right on the south coast. And this is called the Usa,
Right.
the Usa head. Have you guys seen this before?
No, I never have.
Go back.
Okay, this is worn
Back.
by a person May the 1st, and they do a ritual dance wearing this weird head at the Cern Abbas Giant. And the Cern Abbas Giant is an earthwork, and it's of a man. This is enormous earthwork etched into the side of a hill in Dorset in England, and he has a giant penis. Have you guys seen that?
No. No.
Okay, well, it's one of the most ancient earthworks. Again, we're not really sure how old it is. It probably goes back to the Iron Age, may even be older than that. So we're looking at, say, 2000 BC. And they do this ritual dance at dawn, and a person wears this Usa head. This Usa head, I've traced the origins of this back to Molech, which is the Hebrew word for king. And in the Canaanite cults of Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, in the Mediterranean coastal area of Arabia, they worshipped this god.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is the horned beast, or the horned god. And if you look very, very closely, it's made from real skin. It's made from cow skin. And it's been deliberately kind of, it's like a leather that's been embossed. And they've deliberately embossed reptilian type scales into the surface of the leather.
Wow. That is amazing.
Yeah. And after they do the ritual dance, they stick this giant Usa head on a wooden stave in the ground, and then they put candles inside it, so the eyes light up, and the smoke from the candles come out of two tiny holes on the tops of the horns.
Wow.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing.
And that's called the Usa. And you can see all of this in documentaries on the Enigma channel. If you're interested in this type of thing, I find it very interesting.
Right.
He probably does have his roots in some kind of constellation, which A star constellation which has been lost in the mists of time. But I thought it's a very interesting thing to post up because I've never discussed this on any radio show or any radio broadcast before.
Wow.
Now, if you scroll down below that, this has definitely never, ever been published ever before. This is from Dorset Museum.
Okay.
And you can see this sepia photograph, and they are known as the mummers.
The mummers. Okay.
Yeah.
No.
And their dress is almost identical to what you see in Arabia with these secret gatherings, which have been outlawed under Islam. These types of costumes predate Islam. And in Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia, you see people wearing these very, very strange costumes. They have constellations and planets and the moon and stars embroidered onto their hats. Their faces are covered. And this is a tradition that you see in Africa. A lot of the spiritual voodoo festivals feature dancers whose faces are covered.
Okay.
And in the middle, with a kind of weird club, is what we today call Father Christmas.
Oh.
Yeah. That's what I was.
And they are holding these poles.
Okay.
And those poles have got ribbons tied around them. And you can see that there is a bouquet of flowers. This is from a spring festival. Again, it's Beltane. It's May the 1st. And these are the mummers who used to go out into Dorset, and they predate the Morris dancers.
Wow.
Now, have you guys ever seen a movie called The Wicker Man?
No.
I've heard of it. I've not seen it though.
You've never seen The Wicker Man?
No.
Oh my God! You guys, you got to get onto the Enigma channel because there's a TV series there called it's called Forbidden Films.
Okay.
And you know, we basically review very rare movies about the occult.
Okay.
And this is very much the precursor of the maypole dancing.
Okay. Which is
And it's a fertility dance. The poles are representing the penis.
Sure.
And the horns on the head of the Usa, they also represent the erect male phallus. And this is all to do with springtime and fertility. You can also see that the costumes of the mummers have these tassels hanging from the tunics.
Sure.
This is exactly what you see with the Hopi, the Arapaho, and the Apache.
Right. Yep. Now, would this be the basis for Lorena McKennett's song, The Mummers Dance, or whatever? She did a song called Mummers Dance.
Oh, I don't know that. Who's the artist?
Lorena McKennett. She was.
Yes.
Yep.
I can tell you now, she is very, very good. And she does a lot of research. She's very, very well read. And I believe that, if it's her, she would most certainly have done her research. Her music is absolutely spine-tingling.
It is. It's hauntingly beautiful. It's just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, to be absolutely honest, she is my favorite artist.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Yeah, because she combines flamenco, Irish, Gaelic, spiritual music, all of the elements of Arabian kind of spiritual music. I love her music. It's amazing stuff.
Yeah, so if you get a chance, check out The Mummers Dance by her. It's an amazing, beautiful song.
Yeah, I bet you that is referencing it. Now, if you scroll down below the mummers, you can see this is what you find in most African villages in the so-called Ivory Coast nations.
Okay.
Democratic Republic of Congo, Benin, Upper Volta, all along the Ivory Coast. You go into the villages, and very often they've got a little kind of gazebo.
Okay.
And it's a makeshift kind of shed. These things date back to prehistoric times.
Okay.
This is going back now. We're looking at what's known as an Eleguya. Eleguya. This goes back so far, guys, that nobody's really sure when it began. This is before Bronze Age, before Iron Age. This is going right the way back to the Stone Age. In my book, Stone Age Psychedelia, you can see a lot of these Eleguyas. Some have horns, some don't.
Okay.
Some have eyes that are made from caraway shells. And these are the statues that contain inside that statue is the protector elder spirit for that particular village.
Wow.
And you can see that there are these brown, long stained marks on his face.
Right.
That's blood.
Oh.
And what they do is they cut the head off of a chicken or some other animal, cut the throat of an animal. They release the life force of the animal, which is contained in the red blood cells, and dribble that blood over the statue to awaken the spirit inside. And the reason they wake the spirit up is because they then want to do a pact. And the pact is usually to do with fertility of the crops, to bring rain, for example, or to stop the rain if they're in a flood season, or to bring fertility to the members of the village.
Wow. Okay.
A pact is signed, and sometimes they have wooden figures, which are called Nkisi and Kondi figures. If it's a wooden Nkisi and Kondi doll instead of a clay Eleguya, they will bang a nail into that doll as a kind of reminder that there's a pact, that the spirit is going to go off into the spirit world, and he's going to talk to the god of the winds, the god of the rain, the god of lightning, the god of the sun, on behalf of the villagers, and bring about weather conditions that they want. Wow. This is just one example. I mean, it could be that, you know, a very, very senior member of the village is for some reason having problems to conceive a child. It could, you know, these pacts are done for any kind of reason.
Wow.
You know, all kinds of reasons. Now, he's got blue pigment on his head.
Yep.
And this is a marking as well that a pact has been done, but it's also a present. It's also a gift to the spirit inside the Eleguya. That blue pigment there is actually Omo washing powder, which is used in voodoo in Africa. In actual fact, they make their voodoo masks, and then you see these young lads, they've carved their voodoo masks ready for the voodoo festivals that they have there, and then they've got a packet of Omo washing powder. You know, the first time I found this, I was wandering around with my camera. I think, oh God, and I said, "Are you going to do your washing?" He said, "No. We rub this powder into the masks that we've carved because it's the right color blue that is a very ancient type of blue that is always used in voodoo."
Oh, okay.
I know it sounds weird. It is weird, but that's what goes on. You can see all this on the Enigma channel. Okay, you can see at least a dozen villages with voodoo ceremonies, you name it.
Well,
the other thing that they do as a gift for the spirit is you can see that the mouth is open, and they will cook a special cornmeal porridge especially for the spirit inside the Eleguya.
Oh, okay.
And they will sit there with a little spoon and they will put dollops of this porridge inside the mouth, and they bless the bowl of porridge first. And this is, again, a gift in exchange for the spirit going off into the spirit world to actually do a deal with the primal forces, the primal spirits that control nature.
Wow, that is amazing. I don't know how
Yeah.
how do you even the diversity of things that you cover on the Enigma channel are, first of all, it's mind numbing, but how, I mean, how can you find out so much about so many things? It's just, you know.
Well, you have to go. People say this to me, but when you're making films, I mean, you have to go. You have to go to the source. You have to go there.
Sure.
And I'm very. I mean, obviously, I didn't know anything about voodoo at one time, but after you've been to these places several times,
Right.
it's like everything really. After you've been there and you've been sitting with people and you're asking like a lot of questions and you're filming stuff, and then you're sitting in the hotel at night and you're reviewing all the stuff you've filmed, you're reviewing all the photographs. After a couple of years, it clicks and you think, I realize now what is happening here.
Wow.
And then obviously European museums. I mean, I live in Europe.
Sure.
There are tens of thousands of African voodoo artifacts. This is no exaggeration.
Sure.
Okay. There is one museum in Paris. It's got some weird name. It's called something like, if I remember rightly, it's called something like Le Musée de Pompati or something strange.
Okay.
I was tipped off to go there by a curator at another museum because he could see that I was interested in African artifacts. So I went along there. This is the first time I went there. This is absolutely verbatim true. They've got 90,000 African voodoo artifacts.
Oh my God.
This is one museum in Paris.
Oh.
So I mean, I'm booked up now to go and film some voodoo artifacts in a private collection in Switzerland.
Uh-huh.
The sad thing is this, lads, about colonialism, is that if you want to study Egyptology or you want to study voodoo, the sad thing is you have to be in Europe.
Right. Right.
Right.
Because they stole so much stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
They didn't like steal just anything.
Right.
They stole everything.
The most important artifacts are actually sitting in museums in Turin. I've been to museums in the back of nowhere in Italy, like right out in the countryside. And you literally just wander into a museum, especially in England. I wandered into a museum up in Yorkshire in the north of England, and I could not believe, I didn't know what was inside this museum. They had 6 Egyptian mummies in the caskets.
Oh, wow.
Meticulously painted, that some lord had bought for, he was some lord from the 1800s. He'd bought them for pennies on the street from some hawker in Cairo.
Oh my God. Well, Chris, we got about 2 minutes left.
Oh, we're running out of time again.
Yeah, so I definitely want to give you a chance to promote both your channel, your book, and how people can get a hold of all this.
My book is called Stone Age Psychedelia. My website is ChristopherEverard.com. It's easy to remember. And I'm doing a show later today on TFR, and I have a 33rd degree top Illuminati Freemason as a guest. Wow. How about that?
That's epic.
Yeah.
Okay. And the Enigma TV, how do people sign up?
You go to enigmachannel.com or enigmatv.com. You don't need any set-top box. You don't need anything like that. It works on Android and iOS. It works on your normal TV, and you just get a subscription. A whole year costs $29.
Oh, that's brilliant. Okay.
And there's thousands of exclusive documentaries. I do put the odd documentary or a snippet of one of my shows on Facebook, or like a 10-minute section on YouTube. But the main meat of everything that I produce is all on the Enigma channel. It has to be. Unfortunately, a lot of what I'm making documentaries about is always deleted by Google from
Yeah.
YouTube. They do not like my documentaries where I'm exposing secret societies and blood rituals and all this kind of thing. So they just delete me. So the Enigma channel is the only place where you can actually see the documentaries. Everything on the channel is uncensored.
Well, thank you so much, sir, for being a part of the show again.
It's a pleasure, Brent.
It's always a pleasure to have you on. It's
Yeah,
always
I'll get
amazing.
you to come on my show maybe in a couple of weeks, Brent.
Oh, very good. Yeah, I'm always available.
Yeah. Like we'll stay in touch on on Facebook or whatever.
All right, brother. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for getting up so early for us.
Absolutely.
Yes, it's a pleasure. I'm going to go off to the village now and see what the yellow vests are doing.
Right on.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
dodge the
They've
rubber
got
bullets.
the village in lockdown. You can't get petrol unless you it's really, really interesting.
Very crazy time. But take care, sir. Be careful. And we love you all. Be good, be kind, be nice. Thank you all for being a part of the Paranormal Portal. And stick around. Beyond the Veils coming up next here on TFR iHeart Talk Stream Live. So
Have a good night.
all right. Good night, everybody. And I have to do this.